Well, hello. Glad you made it. Tonight, you and I are going to find out how big everything is, the slow way. We'll drift out from this room, past the planets, past the nearest stars, out of our galaxy entirely, and on to the edge of everything anyone has ever seen. And if that sounds like too much ground for one night, you're right. Which is exactly why nobody is going to hurry. A little housekeeping, said once and quietly. If these nights are kind to your evenings, the like and subscribe buttons help this small channel more than seems reasonable, but only if you mean it. And if you'd like, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what the sky looks like out your window. There's a quiet comfort in knowing who else is out here in the dark with us. Now for the part I actually care about. Get the lights low and get heavy. If you're asleep before we've even cleared the galaxy, wonderful. Nothing out there needs you awake in order to keep happening. And I'll tell the whole story either way, at the same pace, in the same voice. Tonight goes like this. We slip out of the sun's front yard, call on the neighbors, cross the Milky Way from our quiet suburb to its bright downtown, and then keep going, galaxy past galaxy, dark past dark, until we reach the oldest light there is. After that, I'll carry you home. The trip back takes one sentence, and you can sleep through it. Let the day itself drift off first. You won't be needing it until morning. There goes the ceiling, then the roof, then the weather, and just like that you're out, with the whole night to fall through. You're doing beautifully already. The dark softens as you rise. There is no wind yet, because there is no air yet. Only the slow widening of the gap between you and the ground. The ground becoming a country, the country becoming a curve, the curve becoming a color. Blue first, then indigo, then a shade the eye gives up on. Somewhere in that shading, the day lets go of you without a fuss. You are, for the first time tonight, untethered, and the dark has more than enough room. The first thing that happens on a trip like this is that the sun stops being the sun. For every day you've ever lived, it has been the main character. It decided when you woke what the kitchen looked like at breakfast, whether the afternoon was worth going outside for. Now, as you drift away from it, it begins the long, dignified business of becoming a star, one of the crowd, just a regular. A small secret to take along, since we're saying goodbye to daylight. The sun isn't actually yellow. Seen from out here, above all air, it burns a clean, plain white. And it's your sky that does the flattering, scattering the blue away until what's left leans gold. Every postcard sunset you've ever admired was a collaboration. The star provides the light, and the atmosphere provides the manners. The planets slide past in the dark below you, familiar shapes half seen, and we won't wake them. They had their own night, and they keep well. What matters tonight is the light. Sunlight needs a little over 4 hours just to reach Neptune, the last full-sized planet. 4 hours, for the fastest thing there is. Keep that in your pocket. It's the last small number you'll hear for a while. Even the light in your bedroom keeps a range of ages, if you stop to check its papers. The glow of your lamp reaches you effectively newborn, mere billionths of a second old. Moonlight, when it visits, arrives a little over a second old. The starlight coming through the gap in the curtains has been traveling for years, sometimes centuries, and it all lands together on the same windowsill, mixed like guests at a wedding. You've been reading by a blend of nows your whole life. Somewhere out here, the sun's steady exhale of wind and weather finally runs out of push, and the gas between the stars leans in to take over. Two of our machines have crossed that line. Both are still calling home tonight, each surviving on only a few hundred watts, with a little less power available every year. Just this spring, their keepers switched off one more instrument so the rest could stay warm a little longer. The two of them left in 1977, back when their engineers had different haircuts. And nobody out there is giving up. There's a kind of love in that arithmetic. Watts traded for years. Notice too how quiet the leaving is. Space carries no sound, not because nothing happens out here, but because sound needs something to lean on. Air or water or floorboards. And the space between worlds offers nothing of the kind. Every comet that has ever split, every storm on every giant planet, all of it happened in perfect silence. You're drifting through the best insulated hallway ever built. Spare one thought for what the sun is doing behind you, because it explains the porch light's stamina. Every single second, it converts about 4 million tons of itself into pure light and lets it all go. 4 million tons a second, spent on warming planets that mostly aren't even looking, and it has kept that up for over 4 billion years with barely a flicker. It can afford this for billions more. Thrift was never the sun's virtue. Reliability is past the reach of the planets. The sun keeps one more possession, and it's my favorite kind. A whole attic. Astronomers call it the Oort cloud, a deep, dark shell of icy leftovers from the days the solar system was built. Comets in cold storage, billions upon billions of them by the usual estimates. Nobody has ever photographed it. We know it's there the way you know what's in a neighbor's attic, by what occasionally comes down the stairs. Every so often a comet with a preposterously long orbit falls in toward the sun, grows a tail, alarms a few poets, and heads back out. Those are the attic's letters, and they've been arriving for as long as anyone has kept records. The attic got its name in 1950, when a Dutch astronomer named Jan Oort sat down with the orbits of every long-haul comet on record and did the bookkeeping. All the paths pointed back to the same deep shelf of space. He wrote down what had to be there, and the cloud has carried his name ever since. Nobody has seen it since, not him, not anyone after. Some of the best work in astronomy was deduced entirely from the receipts. The comets themselves are worth a slow thought. A typical one is a mountain of old ice and dust, dark as a coal cellar on the outside, unchanged since before the Earth had oceans. Some take thousands of years to complete one lap, and some take millions, crossing the inner solar system exactly once, while anything like us is around to wave. The attic doesn't rush its correspondence. You won't feel any of this passing. There's no wind out here to lean into, no fence posts ticking by, nothing to mark the speed except your own quiet certainty that the sun keeps getting smaller. Motion, without landmarks, feels exactly like rest. It's one of space's better mercies, and tonight we're going to use it shamelessly. You'll hear me say roughly and about a great deal tonight, and I'd like you to hear those words as friends. Out here, the honest numbers come with soft edges, and the people who measure them would rather hand you a true about than a false exactly. Bedtime astronomy, like bedtime, runs on trustworthy approximations. Now I'd like to hand you tonight's most useful possession. Not a fact, exactly, a model. Shrink the sun until it's a cherry, and set that cherry on your nightstand. On that scale, the Earth is a grain of salt about 2 meters away, somewhere over by the door. Neptune, the outermost planet, is a small bead about 65 meters down your street. And the next cherry over, the nearest star to ours, sits about 580 kilometers from your bedroom. One cherry here, one cherry in a city several hours' drive away. And in between, essentially nothing. A few grains, a lot of quiet. Sit with that a moment, in a comfortable way. Every star you have ever seen is a cherry in an empty country, minding a few grains of its own. When you look up at a crowded night sky, you're looking at the loneliest arrangement imaginable, wearing its best face. Somehow that face is still lovely. I've spent a career's worth of nights on it, and I'm not finished. The sun does all its work from that one small pit of light. Every sunburn, every harvest, every golden hour that ever flattered a photograph, all of it poured out of one cherry into a country of dark, and the dark never once objected. Generosity on that scale doesn't need an audience. It has simply never learned to stop. One more thing before we let it shrink away. From the neighborhood you're heading into, our sun is nothing special at all. Seen from a garden by the nearest stars, it would be just one more bright point in somebody else's constellation, a decent star in a sky full of them, with no hint that it owns a world where anyone is currently tucked in. Every star over your house tonight is somebody's entire daylight. The sky is wall-to-wall main characters, every one of them an extra in everyone else's story, and no two of them have ever met. You're leaving ours behind now, and it's all right. Look back one last time, the way you'd glance at the house pulling out of the driveway. Behind you, the porch light stays lit. It'll stay lit long after everyone now living has handed the watching on to someone else. Small, faithful, and exactly where you left it. 4 years and a few months. That's the road ahead of you at the speed of light, and light does not dawdle. Light crosses your bedroom in a few billionths of a second, and could lap the Earth 7.5 times between 2 ticks of a clock. It reaches the moon in about 1.25 seconds. The sun's own light takes just over 8 minutes to fall on your face. Then comes the gap between the cherries, and even light, doing all of that, needs 4 years and 3 months to cross it. That's what a light year is, by the way. Distance, not time, whatever the movies imply. It's the ground light covers in a year of running flat out, and the nearest star is 4.25 of them away. Units matter, and I say that with feeling. In 1999, we lost an entire Mars probe because one team wrote its thrust figures in metric, and another read them as imperial, and the poor machine arrived at the wrong height, and Mars kept it. I bring this up roughly once a night. It still helps. We'll be traveling in metric, and, where it's kinder, in cherries. The neighbors, when you reach them, turn out to be a family of 3. Alpha Centauri, first of the household, pronounced Centauri, is a pair of suns circling each other closely, and the larger of the two is nearly a twin of ours. Same warm color, same steady temper, a star you could squint at and mistake for home. The two of them waltz around each other roughly every 80 years, close enough that from a planet by one, the other would hang in the sky like a lamp too bright to ignore. The neighborhood keeps other households too, and one of them you know by sight, wherever you live. Sirius, the brightest star in Earth's whole night, is another near neighbor, less than 9 light-years out, and it comes as a pair. Around the big, bright primary circles, a strange little companion, a retired star squeezed down to roughly the size of the Earth, while keeping most of the weight of a sun. A teaspoon of it would outweigh a car. It spends its retirement cooling off, very slowly, like the best kind of grudge. If you live in the southern half of the world, you've seen the Centauri family with your own eyes. Alpha Centauri shines there as one of the brightest stars in the whole night, a fixture over beaches and back gardens from Cape Town to Melbourne, pointing the way to the Southern Cross. People hang laundry under it and never once think, there are the neighbors. Which is fair. The neighbors have never once thought about the laundry. How do we even know how far it is? With a trick you can do from your bed, hold a thumb up in front of your face and close one eye, then the other, and watch the thumb hop against the far wall. Nearby things hop, distant things hold still. Astronomers do the same with the whole Earth, looking at a star in June and again in December from opposite sides of our orbit, and measuring the tiny hop. The first person to pull it off, back in 1838, proved in one measurement that the stars were unthinkably far, and the sky has been getting bigger, honestly and by inches, ever since. Picture him that night, if you like. A man at a telescope in the long European winter, recording a position no human eye had any business caring about, and then doing the patient thing of waiting half a year to record it again. The two measurements disagreed by a sliver so small it lived at the very edge of what his instrument could resolve. From that sliver, the universe stepped outward by a distance the mind still declines to hold. One observer, one star, one winter of waiting, and the whole sky got larger by a factor that has never stopped growing. Then there's the third member of the family. A little apart from the waltzing pair lives Proxima, a red dwarf, small and dim and faithful, and of all the stars in the universe, this one is ours. The closest star to the sun, full stop. And the detail I love. You have never seen it. Nobody has. Not with a bare eye. It's too faint. The nearest star in all the sky spent the whole of human history hiding in plain dark, and we only caught it in 1915, when an astronomer with a telescope and a stubborn streak went looking. Even its closest secrets, the universe, keeps politely. Proxima has at least one planet, roughly the size of Earth, riding an orbit where the temperature could allow liquid water. Whether it's anywhere you'd want a picnic, nobody knows yet, and nobody has to know tonight. A small red sun, a small stone world, 4 light years from your pillow. There are people alive now, I should mention, sketching featherweight probes meant to ride laser light and make this crossing within a generation. Whether it ever happens, nobody knows tonight. I take it as a good sign that somebody, somewhere, is drawing. If you stood on that little world, the sky would owe you 2 extra lights. The bright pair of Alpha Centauri would hang together like a paired lamp, casting the kind of doubled shadows nothing on Earth ever casts. And our own sun would be somewhere in the crowd behind you, dressed as an ordinary star. Sunsets come in more varieties than one out there. We happen to own the plainest kind. As best anyone can tell, red dwarfs like Proxima are also the great long-distance runners of the universe. They burn so thriftily that they'll still be glowing, dim and content, when our sun has long since retired. Small stars keep their savings. 6 light years out sits another one, Barnard's Star, and it comes with the best running joke in the neighborhood. For most of a century, astronomers kept announcing planets around it, big ones, bold ones, and every single claim fell apart on closer inspection. The star became a byword for wishful thinking. Then, in 2025, the instruments finally got sharp enough, and there they were. 4 small planets, real ones at last, each carrying roughly 1/5 to 1/3 of Earth's mass, all of them circling so tightly that their years last mere days. Barnard's Star spent 100 years saying nothing, and then said 4 things at once. Barnard's Star holds one more record, and it's a sleepy one. Among all the stars in the sky, it's the fastest mover against the background, the great sprinter of the celestial vault. And even so, it needs about 2 human lifetimes to cross a patch of sky as wide as the full moon. That's the sky's idea of haste. The record holder for hurry would lose a foot race with a garden. Conversation with any of these places, mind you, will stay difficult. Send a radio hello toward Proxima's planet tonight, and the very soonest any answer could arrive is more than 8 years from now, with both ends of the mail running at the speed of light. The neighbors are pleasant, but the postage is ruinous. Astronomy is the art of being on excellent terms with people you can never quite have over. Proxima, for its part, belongs to the household in the fullest sense. As far as anyone can tell, it's gravitationally bound to the bright pair, circling them on an orbit so wide and unhurried that a single lap takes on the order of 500,000 years. Somewhere in the deep past, it presumably joined the family, and it has been making its one slow round of the property ever since. Nobody in that arrangement has ever felt rushed. Notice what you're not seeing out here, though. Traffic. The stars are cherries hundreds of kilometers apart, and they essentially never collide, never crowd, never so much as brush sleeves. Our fastest machines would need tens of thousands of years to make the crossing you just made in a breath. If one of them ever does arrive, the neighbors will not have moved. Patience is the local architecture. You're 4 light years from bed, further than any human thing has ever traveled, and the overwhelming impression is of a well-kept quiet. 3 small suns, keeping one another company in all that room, with a handful of little worlds between them. Out here, that counts as a crowd. The crowd, tonight, is silent, and the silence is friendly. You'd never guess it from a lawn chair, but the space around our sun has a shape, and the shape has a story. For the next 1,000 light years in most directions, the gas between the stars is strangely thin and strangely warm, as if someone had aired the place out. Astronomers call this region the local bubble, and your bed, your street, your whole sky sits comfortably inside it. The walls of the bubble are the interesting part. All around that thin, warm hollow runs a shell of colder, denser gas and dust, swept up like snow at the edge of a plowed field. A few years ago, astronomers finished mapping it properly, and the story fell into place. Starting around 14 million years ago, a series of massive stars in this district reached the ends of their lives and let go, one after another, over millions of years. Each ending swept the fog outward a little further. The bubble is the tidy room those endings left behind. 14 million years deserves a little scenery of its own. When the first of those stars let go, Earth was already old and busy, with whales in its oceans and forests full of small, capable apes with excellent grips, some of whom were your direct grandmothers. The bubble is younger than the family, in other words. I find that oddly companionable, a piece of the sky's architecture that went up after we did, like a fence the neighborhood added within the family's memory. Each one of those old stars burned brighter than 100,000 suns, ran out of fuel and folded, and there's no dressing up what that is. It's a death. The universe held a dozen or so of them here, in the space where you now sleep. And then, being the universe, it got on with the housework. The swept-up walls grew thick and cold and heavy, and inside them, something lovely started. New stars. Nearly every stellar nursery in our corner of the galaxy, every cloud now quietly folding itself into new suns, sits on the surface of the local bubble, right in the swept-up snow. The nurseries carry friendly names: Taurus, Ophiuchus, the Southern Crown, soft fogs of future suns that patient photographers know well. Mapped carefully, every single one turns out to sit on the bubble's skin, like dew strung on a tent. That was the giveaway in the end. When everything young you can find lies on the same curved surface, you stop believing in coincidence and start drawing the sphere. The old star's endings piled up exactly the material that beginnings are made of. Nothing about that was planned, and none of it was wasted. The universe composts. My favorite part of the story, though, the sun didn't blow this bubble, and wasn't even here for the fireworks. We were somewhere else entirely when it happened, minding our own orbit. Around 5 million years ago, the sun simply drifted in through one wall, the way you'd walk into a hall someone else had decorated, and we've been crossing it ever since. By the standards of this neighborhood, we've barely unpacked. By luck, we're passing through the middle, just as creatures on one of the sun's planets learned to measure such things. From the center of a bubble, Every wall is roughly the same distance away, which made the maps unusually tidy, which made the discovery easier. The universe occasionally holds the door. The mapping itself was honest, patient work, and it deserves a nod in the dark. Dust dims and reddens the starlight that passes through it, the way smoke reddens a sunset. So astronomers measured the colors of millions of stars at known distances and worked out where the dust lay thick and where it didn't. Stack enough of those soundings together, and the hollow simply appears, the way a cave reveals itself to dripping water. No single measurement ever saw the bubble. All of them together couldn't miss it. 1,000 light years is worth feeling before we go on. Light that left the far side of this one bubble around the time the Normans were rowing toward England is only arriving at your window now. One room of the galaxy, one crossing, most of recorded history. And this room is nothing special. The galaxy is foam, bubble against bubble against bubble, each one blown by its own old endings, like the inside of a loaf of bread. Hold the nesting gently for 1 second, because it's tonight's whole shape in miniature. That cherry on your nightstand was the sun. The entire solar system, cherry and grains and the bead down the street, sits inside this bubble the way a single droplet sits inside a cathedral. And the cathedral you're about to see is one brick of something larger still. The universe is a set of nesting dolls that never quite reaches the last doll. Our lease here, I should add, has an end date, and it's a comfortable one. The sun's path will carry it out through the far side of the bubble a few million years from now, the models say, and on into whatever room comes next. Nothing changes for the passengers. The neighborhoods out here differ in fog and furnishings, not in weather anyone can feel, and the sun has crossed many such rooms before, without any planet noticing. We're travelers of the calmest possible kind, the kind who sleep through every border. Telescopes, by the way, see the same foam in other galaxies' faces, shells and hollows blown by their own generations of endings, nurseries strung along their own swept walls. It's one of those patterns the universe apparently can't stop making, like rings in wood or ripples on sand. Wherever stars are made and spent, bubbles follow. The whole sky, near and far, turns out to be gently carbonated. So when you pull the blanket up tonight, you can add one more layer to the inventory. The blanket, the roof, the sky, and then a bubble 1,000 light years wide, with new stars condensing gently on its walls. You live indoors in more ways than one. The outermost wall glows in the dark, and it's a nursery. The bubble drifts, and the sun drifts through it. Nothing about any of it needs a thing from you tonight, and the walls will still be glowing when you wake. Back in the room, the duvet has settled where you left it, and the glass of water on the stand catches whatever light the street lamp lets in. None of it has moved. The bubble has moved. The sun has moved. The earth has moved a respectable distance along its lap, and the water glass has moved with all of them, faithfully, without a tremor. You can trust a thing that keeps its surface this still. Keep rising now, and watch the whole neighborhood politely become a floor plan. Bubbles and nurseries and 10,000 nights worth of stars flatten and gather below you, And the thing they gather into is the galaxy itself, the Milky Way, the house that every star you've ever seen lives in. The proportions of the house surprise most people. Our galaxy is about 100,000 light-years across, give or take a suburb, but only around 1,000 light-years thick through most of the disk. That's the proportion of a dinner plate, grand in width, humble in depth, and everything you've ever loved kept somewhere in the glaze. From above, the house is a spiral, and not a bad one. Long, bright arms of stars and glowing gas wind out from the middle like cream stirred once, slowly, into coffee, with a straight bar of older golden stars right through the center. Downtown has a bar. Most respectable galactic downtowns do, and ours wears it straight across the middle like a tie clip. The arms come with a secret, and it's a gentle one. They aren't fixed rivers of particular stars. They're more like slow traffic, regions where stars and gas bunch up on their way around, the way cars bunch on a highway with no accident to blame. Individual stars drift into an arm, linger, and drift out the far side over millions of years. The pattern stays while every member changes. Ask any city. That's how a city works too. We live out in the quiet part, on a modest side street called the Orion Arm, a smaller spur between two of the grand avenues. It's the galactic equivalent of a leafy outer suburb. Good schools of fish in the local dark, so to speak, and very little downtown noise. Every single star you can pick out with your bare eye on any night of your life is a near neighbor from this same small district. A few thousand light years at most, one corner of one arm of one galaxy. Nobody knows exactly how many stars the whole house holds, and I find the honesty refreshing. The counts run from about 100 billion up toward 400 billion, depending on how you tally the dim red ones, which are most of everybody and nearly impossible to see. Its census takers have the hardest job in the business. Their citizens are shy, the rooms are dusty, and the survey has to be done from one fixed chair. The address book, at least, is coming along wonderfully. A surveying satellite has now pinned down the positions, colors, and drifts of nearly 2 billion of the house's stars, the most painstaking census ever compiled of anything, and it still covers no more than about one resident in 100. The mapmakers celebrated the milestone and went straight back to work. You have to admire a field where charting 100th of the neighborhood counts correctly as a golden age. Try counting anyway, just for the feel of it. 1 star per second, no bathroom breaks, no holidays. 100 billion stars at that pace takes over 3,000 years. Start tonight and you'd finish somewhere around the year 5,000, having counted only the low estimate, and the galaxy would have made new stars behind you the whole time, like a host quietly refilling bowls at a party. There's one more secret in the floor plan, found only recently. The dinner plate isn't perfectly flat. Out toward the rim, the disc takes a slight, elegant curl, up on one side and down on the other, like a hat brim or the first bend of a potato chip. The galaxy has been jostled over the ages, by passing neighbors, by its own appetites, and it wears the history in its shape. Even houses this large settle. The house also keeps chandeliers, and I nearly forgot to point them out. Above and below the disk, well off the floor plan, hang around 150 globular clusters, dense glittering balls of hundreds of thousands of stars apiece, orbiting the galaxy the way moths circle a lamp. The stars inside them are among the oldest anywhere, many close to 13 billion years old, senior to the disk itself. Our galaxy hung its oldest lights highest, which is either reverence or good housekeeping. One confession about the weighing of the house, offered plainly because you'd hear it eventually. When astronomers add up everything that shines, the total comes out far too light. The stars and gas together can't explain how fast the rim of the plate swings around. So something else, unlit and unseen, seems to hold the house together, outweighing all the visible rooms several times over. Nobody yet knows what it is. The census takers, to their credit, took the news calmly, wrote unknown in the ledger, and kept counting. The house is still busy too, in its unhurried way. Out of all that gas and dust, the galaxy knits a handful of brand new stars each year. A modest but extremely steady birth rate it has sustained for eons, and it holds fuel enough to keep at it for billions of years to come. Somewhere in the disk tonight, a star is being finished. Nobody will cut a ribbon. It'll just start shining, and the house will be one lamp brighter, and that's how the place has always been furnished. People have never agreed on what to call the pale band of it, and I love the catalog of attempts. The Greeks saw spilled milk, which is where our word galaxy comes from. Travelers in old China saw a silver river crossing heaven. In the Kalahari, some say, it was called the backbone of night, the great spine that holds the dark upright. Every culture that ever slept outdoors looked up at the same edge-on dinner plate and reached for the most familiar comfort it knew. Milk, rivers, backbones, home things, everyone. Starlight arriving tonight from the far side of the disk, left home when your species' whole family still lived in Africa, and the longest trip anyone had taken was on foot. It crossed the entire house in the time it took us to cross one planet. Both parties, I'd say, made respectable progress. The part I'd like you to keep, though, and you already own it. You have seen this galaxy from inside with your own eyes. That soft, pale band across a truly dark summer sky, the one campers and sailors know, is the dinner plate viewed edge-on from a seat inside the rim. All those 100 billion stars, too far to separate, pooled into a stripe of spilled light over your head. People have been sleeping under the floor plan all along. If you have ever lain on a hillside in August with the lights far off, you have lain inside the plate and looked up through it, the way a fish might look up through the underside of a lily pad. The spilled stripe was the rest of the house, seen edge-on, all 100 billion lamps blurred together by distance into one soft glow. Dark lanes run through it, dust drawn across the brighter rooms behind, like the galaxy's own curtains. The view was never upward at all. It was sideways, from somewhere deep inside the plate. No one who lives here has ever seen the house from outside, and likely no one ever will. Every gorgeous spiral portrait of the Milky Way you've ever met is a careful guess, stitched from surveys and star counts, and comparisons with other galaxies. We're in the odd position of knowing our home mostly by its resemblance to the neighbors. The house is large, the lights are on, and the residents map it from one small window, patiently, and are rarely wrong by much. Below you, the plate turns, wide as 100,000 years of light, thin as a plate deserves to be, holding its bubbles and its nurseries and its billions of small lamps without visible effort. It was doing this long before anyone was here to admire it, and it finds its own way of being enough. Hold perfectly still for a moment. That's a joke, by the way. You have never held still in your life, and neither has anyone else. And this next room is about how far from still you are at this exact moment, flat on your back, going nowhere. Your bed is turning with the earth. The earth is circling the sun, and the sun, with all its planets and grains and cherries in tow, is riding the great carousel of the galaxy itself, swinging around that bright, distant center at roughly 800,000 kilometers an hour. Nothing you will do tomorrow will move you as fast as your mattress is moving you right now. Commuting, it turns out, is best done asleep. For the record, the fastest machine humans have ever flown is a sun-grazing probe that tops out near 700,000 kilometers an hour, a genuinely heroic number. Your mattress, gliding with the galaxy, quietly beats it. Engineers spent decades on that record, and you've broken it every night of your life, unassisted, in pajamas. The carousel is in no rush, mind you, because the track is enormous. Even at that speed, one full lap of the galaxy takes somewhere around 230 million years. There's a name for that, the galactic year, and I'd like you to feel how long it is, because it's the kind of number that behaves badly until you give it scenery. The last time the sun was where it is right now, one lap ago, the Earth's continents were still gathered into one piece. Even the very first dinosaurs were small, new, nervous things, trying out a body plan nobody was sure about yet. One lap. The dinosaurs got the whole ride, as it happens. They boarded near the start of it and stepped off 2/3 of the way around, and the carousel never noticed either event. That up the sun's whole life, and it has made only about 20 of these laps. 20 galactic birthdays since it first lit. On that calendar, ours is a star in its confident middle years. The mortgage half paid, the temper settled, a long, steady stretch of laps still ahead of it. You picked a good carousel horse, is what I'm saying. The sun doesn't ride flat either. It bobs as it goes, drifting slowly up through the plane of the dinner plate, and then easing back down through it, over and over, tens of millions of years per bob. Like a horse on a fairground pole, it moves too slowly for any eye to catch. We're currently a little above the exact middle of the plate, on our way somewhere, unhurried. A detail I keep in a drawer for nights like this, because the bob and the lap never quite repeat. The sun has never once crossed the same patch of space twice. Neither have you. Every night of your life has been spent somewhere the universe had never put you before, and tonight is no exception. You are, right now, the first person ever to fall asleep exactly here. Against the nearest stars, meanwhile, the sun has its own private drift, a stroll of its own toward the part of the sky where the bright star Vega lives. Nothing dramatic, an amble, but it means the neighborhood portrait is slowly rearranging. Every constellation you know is a snapshot of traffic. Give the sky 100,000 years, and it will have quietly redrawn all of them, and some future insomniac will need new names for everything. Part of the night's stillness, mind you, is company. The stars around us are riding the same carousel we are, wheeling along together like traffic in one long motorway lane. So the drift between neighbors stays gentle, even while the shared speed stays enormous. Your sky holds still, for the same reason the car beside you on the highway seems to float. Everyone out here is doing the same thing at once. Now measure all of that against the calmest yardstick the universe keeps, the oldest light there is, which we're headed to at the very end of the night. Measured against it, your bedroom is moving at roughly 1.33 million kilometers an hour. That's the clean figure, the one that doesn't add speeds from different rooms together. It's still, by any homely measure, absurdly fast, and you feel none of it. No rattle, no lean, no hum in the floorboards. The tea on your nightstand has never once spilled on the galaxy's account. Motion this large and this smooth simply doesn't register on a body, and so the fastest thing you'll ever do is indistinguishable from lying in bed with your eyes closed. Which is convenient, because that's exactly what you're doing. I find the whole arrangement very easy to trust. Nothing about the carousel requires supervision. It ran for billions of years before anyone was aboard to enjoy it. It will run all night tonight, and the operator has never once needed to be woken up. One more comfort from the big calendar, and then I'll stop doing arithmetic at you. If a single lap of the carousel were one day, then all of recorded human history, every empire, every alphabet, every grandmother's grandmother back to the first campfire, would fit into about the last 4 seconds before midnight. Nothing that happened to you today registers on the house clock yet. Whatever felt urgent this afternoon is, by the galaxy's watch, not even a full breath old, and it can wait for morning. So let the ride carry you. The horses bob, the track curves on for 200 million years, and the carousel turns without any music except the kind you bring. Everyone aboard, as far as I can tell, sleeps well. Turn toward the crowded side of the sky now. Every galaxy keeps a bright middle, and ours is off in the direction of the constellation of the Archer, where the star fields thicken and the lights pile up like a city seen from a night flight. Downtown. We should pay one call there before we leave the house entirely. The light arriving from that center tonight is about 26,000 years old. It left during the last ice age, while glaciers sat on Chicago and your ancestors were painting deer on cave walls by lamplight. And it has been crossing the dinner plate ever since, and it is only landing now. Every glance toward the galactic middle is a glance at the deep past. The mail from downtown runs slow, and nobody complains. The neighborhood gets dense in there. Out here in the suburbs, stars keep hundreds of kilometers of cherry model distance between themselves. Close to the center, the same model would pack thousands of cherries into the space we give one. If you lived on a planet there, your night sky would blaze with stars brighter than any full moon, and true darkness would be something you'd have to read about in books. Beautiful, I'd say, but hard on the sleep schedule. You live in the right district for this channel. At the exact middle of all that brightness sits the quietest resident in the galaxy. In 1974, astronomers found a small, stubborn source of radio noise there and gave it a name with no poetry in it at all: Sagittarius A star. For decades, nobody could say quite what it was. It gave off almost nothing, it never moved, and everything nearby seemed strangely respectful of it. Radio, incidentally, is how downtown first got our attention at all. Back in the 1930s, an engineer at a telephone laboratory in New Jersey, hunting the sources of static on transatlantic calls, noticed a steady hiss that rose and set with the stars, and traced it to the direction of the archer. He had heard the middle of the galaxy humming. The telephone company, to its lasting credit, let him publish. The giveaway was the dancing. Year after year, astronomers watched stars near that silent point swing around it, and one star in particular became the key witness. It loops the unseen thing every 16 years, and at its closest approach, it moves at a few percent of the speed of light, one of the fastest orbits any star is known to keep. Something invisible was swinging suns around the way a parent swings a child by the arms. Weigh the dance, and you weigh the dancer's partner. The watching, I should say, had to be done in infrared light, because 26,000 light-years of dust stand between your window and downtown, and ordinary light gives up partway. Infrared is the color that walks through dust politely. Astronomers built cameras for it, corrected for the shimmer of our own air with lasers and clever mirrors, and then simply attended, season after season, while one star traced its long ellipse around nothing visible at all. For scale, the dancing star's boldest move brings it within about 4 times the distance from the Sun to Neptune, which in galactic center terms is leaning over the banister. It makes that pass on schedule, every lap, and has never once been late. Say what you will about the resident, it keeps an orderly calendar. The answer came out to about 4 million times the mass of our Sun, packed into a region smaller than the orbit of Mercury. There's only one thing the universe makes that fits that description: a black hole. And I'll say the words plainly, because at bedtime, plain is kindest. A black hole is a place where gravity has closed the door. Whatever crosses in, light included, doesn't come back out, and that is truly all a black hole does. It doesn't hunt, doesn't roam, doesn't prowl the halls. Mostly it sits and keeps what it's given, like a locked drawer at the bottom of the house. Give that its due weight, because it deserves a moment of honesty. There are doors in this universe that only open one way, and now set it down, because the rest of the truth is gentler. Ours is the calmest such door anyone could ask for. The stars near it have safe, stable orbits and keep them. Nothing in its manner threatens the suburbs, 26,000 light-years out, where you and every star you've ever wished on live and circle, unbothered. It has held its place while the galaxy turned 20 laps around it, and it has been, on the whole, a model tenant. Ours is also, by big city standards, on a strict diet. Some galaxies keep central black holes that feed hard and shine across the universe while doing it. Ours nibbles. Most nights it takes in almost nothing, a thin drizzle of gas, and the astronomers who monitor it describe a flicker here, a small flare there, the housekeeping of a very old resident warming very little soup. There's evidence the diet was livelier once. Towering above and below downtown, telescopes have traced two enormous, faint balloons of energetic exhaust, each tens of thousands of light years tall, like steam hanging over a kettle that boiled long ago. They seem to be leftovers from some grand old meal, millions of years back, when the center fed properly for a while. It has been quiet ever since. Even the galaxy's heart, apparently, had a livelier youth it declines to discuss. In 2022, we finally saw its portrait. Telescopes on several continents linked together into one instrument effectively the size of the Earth, and stared, and combined their staring, and produced an image of a soft golden ring of hot gas with a round dark middle. The dark middle is the black hole's shadow, the closest an image can bring us to that one-way door. 50 years passed between hearing that radio whisper and seeing that ring. The paperwork took half a century, and the subject never once hurried it. Two of the astronomers who spent decades proving what sat at the center shared a Nobel Prize for it in 2020. What I like best is how the proof was done. No explosion, no drama, just one star, watched patiently for 16 years at a time, by people who came into the observatory night after night, checked its position, and went home. Some of the grandest facts we own were bought with attendance. So that's downtown. Thousands of bright rooms, one quiet heavyweight at the center of the dance floor, asking nothing, taking almost nothing, keeping the innermost stars on their tight, orderly paths by sheer presence. The galaxy turns around a still point. The still point keeps its own counsel, and the lights up there stay on all night, every night, whether anyone's watching or not. Time to leave the house. Slip up and out through the plane of the plate, out the galaxy's sunroof, and once you're clear of the disk's glow, look toward the south. Hanging there, a little apart from the great bright stripe of the galaxy, are two soft glowing patches, like two small clouds that forgot to drift on with the rest of the weather. They are not clouds, they're galaxies, small ones, our two nearest bright companions, and tonight they're the first stop on the road out. Sailors knew them long before telescopes. The crews of the first European voyage around the world steered the southern oceans by them 500 years ago, and the two patches ended up named after that expedition's captain, the Magellanic Clouds. Southern peoples had names for them long before any ship arrived, of course, and watched them just as carefully. Good lanterns get many names. The larger of the two hangs about 160,000 light years from your bed, the smaller one farther, around 200,000. Each is a galaxy in its own right, with its own stars being born and dying, its own slow weather of gas and dust. Set beside our dinner plate, the big one is roughly a tenth the width, a side table if you like, pulled up next to the main table, set and lit and busy. Feel the age of that light for a moment, because this is where the numbers start to outgrow the family album. The glow arriving from the larger cloud tonight left home while our own species was still young. Every human word ever spoken, every name, every song, every story around every fire, all of it happened while tonight's lantern light was already on its way here. The universe mails its letters early. Inside the larger cloud burns the largest and brightest star-forming region in the local group, a sprawling web of glowing gas called the tarantula. If it sat where our nearest nurseries sit, it would fill a chunk of your night sky and cast shadows. In its heart, astronomers have weighed some of the heaviest stars found anywhere, monsters of 100 suns and more, burning blue-white and fast, and destined to be brief. Small galaxy, grand appetite for making things. The nursery got its name from a photograph, because its glowing filaments sprawl across the frame like long silk legs, and some astronomer with a sense of humor wrote tarantula in the caption, and it stuck. I promise it's the friendliest thing ever named after a spider. The larger cloud itself, while we're admiring it, wears a single, casual spiral arm and an off-center bar, like a house built by someone who stopped consulting the plans early, and it's all the more charming for that. The larger cloud also gave us the most instructive goodbye in modern astronomy. In 1987, one of its stars ended, and for a few weeks, a point of light in the southern sky brightened until you could see it with a bare eye, the nearest such ending anyone had witnessed in modern times. It deserves its plain name. A star died, and the light of that took months to fade, and folded inside it is a gentle marvel. Hours before the light show even began, a handful of ghost particles from the collapsing core passed through the Earth, through instruments, through, in all likelihood, you, if you were alive that February. Detectors in mines around the world quietly counted a couple dozen of them. The star's last breath arrived before its last light, and both were felt and written down and honored. Astronomers have been studying the glowing ring it left ever since, watching an ending become a lesson. There's a human-sized detail in that night worth keeping. The first to catch it was a young astronomer on a mountain in Chile, developing the night's photographs by hand, who found a bright point that hadn't been in the sky the evening before. He walked outside to check with his own eyes, and it was there, real, over the dark ocean. Then he went and knocked on doors. One of the great discoveries of the century began as a man asking his friends to come outside and look up. And I like astronomy best when it works exactly like that. The story is still gaining chapters too, which is the nicest thing about slow light. Only in the last couple of years have instruments finally caught firm signs of the tiny collapsed heart that explosion left behind. A remnant no wider than a city, glowing warmly inside its own wreckage. Astronomers had been looking for it for nearly 4 decades. It was there all along, settling in, taking its time being born. Out here, even the aftermaths are unhurried. The two clouds are companions to our galaxy, held loosely in its gravity, and the latest careful readings suggest they may be making their very first visit, swinging past us after a long fall from farther out, rather than circling us forever. Behind them trails a long ribbon of gas, drawn out in a great arc across the southern sky, the wake of their travels. Even galaxies, it turns out, leave a track in the lawn. They may have left a mark on the house itself, too. Our dinner plate's curled rim, that gentle bend out at the edges, could be partly their doing, the models say. Two heavy guests flexing the disk over the ages, the way footsteps flex a dock. Even the tidiest galaxy wears the marks of its visitors. Company always leaves a dent in the cushions, and good hosts stop minding. Between themselves, the two are having a complicated century. The larger cloud's gravity is slowly untidying the smaller one, drawing streams of its stars and gas away, the way a big sibling borrows things without quite asking. That's real, and worth a plain sentence. Galaxies reshape each other, always have, and the smaller cloud is being reshaped, and it is also still there, still bright, still making new stars of its own, and it will outlast every calendar you and I will ever print. Nothing tonight requires rescuing. Further ahead, the models point to a far grander get-together. A couple of billion years from now, give or take, the larger cloud is expected to spiral in and join our galaxy entirely, adding its stars to ours, two households becoming one. In many current models, that is how large structures out here are built, not from blueprints, from guests who stay. If anyone ever stands on a world in the larger cloud and looks back, by the way, our whole galaxy will hang across their night like a lit city on a hill, a sight worth the trip all by itself. The neighbors, if there are any, have the better view of us. That seems only fair, given how fondly we photograph them. For tonight, though, the two of them simply hang where the sailors left them, low over the southern sea roads, softly lit, each one a whole country of suns pretending to be a smudge. Two lanterns by the door of the house. The galaxy keeps its own night lights, and they're already on. Turn the other way now, toward the northern sky, because one more light has been waiting all night for its introduction, and it's the grandest one on the block. In the constellation of Andromeda, on any truly dark autumn night, a person with ordinary eyes and a little patience can find a small, elongated glow, dim as a breath on glass. People assumed for centuries it was a puff of gas nearby. It is 2.5 million light years away, and it is an entire galaxy, and it's coming over. Let's do the eye first, because I think it's the best free experience in nature. When that faint patch lands on the back of your eye, photons complete a trip of 2.5 million years. Started when nobody on Earth had yet lit a fire on purpose, and finish it on your retina, an organ roughly 2 centimeters wide, the farthest thing a bare human eye can readily catch, ending its run on the most comfortable observing platform there is. You, in a garden, in socks. Catching it is gentler than you'd think. You don't hunt for it so much as let your gaze go soft in the right part of the sky, the way you'd look for a shape in a fogged window, and the smudge, if the night is kind, simply agrees to be there. All those eons of travel, ending on a patch of nerve tissue that evolved to help a small mammal find fruit in a forest. The universe did not arrange that meeting. It merely allowed it, and you walked into it in socks. Your eye, mind you, is catching only Andromeda's bright core. The galaxy's full spread on your sky is astonishing, about 6 times the width of the full moon. More sky than you could cover with 3 fingers held out at arm's length. If human eyes gathered light the way cameras do, in patient long exposures, Andromeda would be one of the grandest fixtures of every autumn evening, a great soft oval hanging over the rooftops. It's up there right now, at full size, being missed. Some grandeur simply runs too faint for the instrument, and knowing it's there anyway is its own quiet luxury. A century ago, this smudge settled the biggest argument in astronomy. Serious people disagreed about whether our galaxy was the entire universe or just one island among many, and they held formal debates about it. Then a young astronomer found a particular kind of pulsing star inside the Andromeda glow, a star whose pulses give away its distance, and the answer landed all at once. The smudge was impossibly far beyond our galaxy's edge. It was another galaxy entirely, and the universe got bigger by a factor of everything, in one measurement, in 1923. The pulsing star that settled it all is still filed under the name it was given that year, V1, variable number 1, the first entry in a ledger that turned out to contain the universe. Years later, the Great Space Telescope was pointed back at that single modest star purely as a gesture of respect. Some instruments get to retire, and some stars become monuments that keep flickering on schedule. Andromeda turns out to be family, and grand family at that. By the usual count, it holds somewhere near 1 trillion stars, spread wider than our own plate, though the weighing goes on and our galaxy may yet prove the heavier of the two. The neighbors, comparing houses, politely unresolved. It keeps its own retinue of small companion galaxies, 2 of which ride close enough that decent binoculars pick them up as extra thumbprints of light beside the main glow. Its downtown, while we're comparing houses, keeps a locked drawer of its own, and a far heavier one, a black hole of 100 million suns and more, dwarfing the modest anchor at the middle of our galaxy. Bigger house, bigger vault. It's every bit as calm as ours, which is worth noticing on the way past. Apparently, the etiquette holds at every scale. The models even suggest Andromeda has already dined grandly once. A couple of billion years ago, by that reading, it absorbed a large companion galaxy, and one of those little thumbprints in your binoculars may be the survivor's polished core, still orbiting the house that took in everything else. Held gently, it's less grim than it sounds. Nothing was lost but the arrangement, and every star involved is still shining somewhere in that broad golden glow. Now the famous part, told properly, at bedtime pace. Andromeda and our galaxy are approaching each other. The gap is closing at around 400,000 kilometers an hour, and for decades, the standard story said the two would meet head-on in about 4 or 5 billion years and merge into a single grand estate. That wedding announcement, as it were, was already drafted. Well, last year, a team of astronomers went back over the whole question with a new generation of sharper data including one detail earlier work had underplayed: the steady sideways tug of that big Magellanic lantern we just visited. Their answer came out delightfully humble. Over the next 10 billion years, the odds of the two great galaxies actually merging are close to a coin flip, and the chance of a direct head-on anytime soon is small. The most rehearsed collision in popular astronomy may simply not, or it may, eventually, at leisure. The universe reserves the right to keep its appointments loosely. The approach itself, for all its speed, is domestic in scale. Each year that passes, the gap between the two galaxies narrows by roughly the span between the Sun and Uranus, and I'll say that name carefully, Uranus, one planetary errand's worth of progress, set against a gulf of millions of light years. At that rate, the pantry empties very slowly. Nobody needs to set the table yet. In one wispy sense, mind you, the introductions have already been made. Andromeda wears an enormous halo of thin, warm gas, mapped a few years ago, and it reaches roughly halfway across the gap toward us, and ours very likely reaches back. The two households already share an atmosphere, the way two farmhouses share a valley's evening mist. Whatever the orbits eventually decide, the air between the houses is friendly, and even in the fullest version of that future, the sentence that matters at this hour: when galaxies meet, their stars do not crash. The distances between stars are so absurd, cherries a whole province apart, that two entire galaxies can pass through one another, with essentially no star touching any other, like two crowds of dandelion seeds drifting through each other on a slow wind. Galaxies merge the way fog banks do. The lights mingle, the shapes swirl into something new, and every fire stays lit. So the honest forecast for the northern smudge runs like this. Maybe, in some era 10 billion years out, the two households blend into one, and the night skies of whatever worlds exist then hold two spilled stripes of light instead of one. Or maybe the two simply waltz at a distance forever, the largest slow dance on record. Either way, nobody you will ever meet, and nobody they will ever meet, misses a single sunrise over it. Some worries are simply too large to fit a human life, and this is the gentlest example I know. Tonight, Andromeda hangs where it has hung for every human generation. A faint, long glow you could find from your own street this autumn, older light than your species has words for, closing the distance at a pace that leaves 10 billion years of margin. It approaches the way the tide approaches a castle, built well up the beach, patiently, honestly, and with no interest whatsoever in ruining anyone's evening. Pull back further now, until both great spirals fit into a single glance, and take the census. What you're looking at is our village. Astronomers call it the local group, which is the kind of name you get when the discovery happens before the coffee, and it is exactly what it sounds like. A modest gathering of galaxies, ours among them, keeping loose company in about 10 million light-years of otherwise unfurnished space. Take the count slowly, the way you'd count boats on a bay at dusk. 2 grand lights, a third respectable one, and then small sails everywhere you settle your eye. More of them the longer you're willing to look. That's the local group from outside, a harbor at nightfall, everything riding gently at anchor. The village has 3 main homesteads. Andromeda is the largest spread. Our Milky Way comes second or first, depending on which scale you trust. And third is a lighter, looser spiral, called Triangulum, a lovely pinwheel of a few tens of billions of stars. It may, by some readings, be more Andromeda's companion than a fully independent farm. 3 spiral estates, then. Everything else in the village is cottages, and there are so many cottages. At the latest count, the local group holds well over 100-member galaxies, and nearly all of them are dwarfs, little glowing settlements of stars gathered around the big 3, or scattered between them. Some are so faint and so sparse, a few thousand stars in all, that calling them galaxies at all feels generous, like calling 3 houses and a postbox a town. The universe does not require a minimum size for belonging. New cottages are still being found, which delights me every time. Surveys keep turning up fainter and fainter members, little congregations of old stars hiding behind the foreground. And every year or so, the village census quietly ticks upward. Imagine living somewhere for your whole life and still discovering new neighbors down the lane. That's our situation, and it shows no sign of ending. Most of the finding is done by computers sifting star maps for faint, round crowds, and then by humans arguing pleasantly over whether each crowd is truly a galaxy or merely a club. The border cases get named anyway. Everything out here gets a name eventually, which I count among our species' most endearing habits. The names alone are worth the visit. There's a dwarf galaxy called Wolf Lundmark Melot, after 3 astronomers who each found it independently and now share it forever, like 3 people gripping one umbrella. Sculptor and Fornax are out there too. The Sculptor and the Furnace, along with Draco the Dragon, and 2 separate galaxies both named Leo, cousins with the same first name, distinguished by number like kings. Browsing the village registry is like reading the census of a small, strange county, and I recommend it on sleepless nights. One of the cottages, I should mention, is in the middle of moving in with us. On the far side of our galaxy's disk, a dwarf called the Sagittarius Galaxy has been easing itself into the Milky Way for the last while. Billions of years of while. Our galaxy's gravity has gently unspooled it into long ribbons of stars that now wrap around the whole sky. Its stars aren't destroyed, you understand. They're adopted, one by one, threaded into our house until the guest and the household are one thing. Moving in, without boxes, on a schedule measured in eras. Some of the cottages, it turns out, are older than the mansions. The faintest dwarf galaxies preserve stars from the universe's earliest generations, little congregations that formed long ago and then simply stopped changing, like villages the railway never reached. Astronomers visit them the way historians visit archives, because what the big flashy galaxies have overwritten, the small quiet ones still remember. A few sit close enough for the great telescopes to read their stars one by one. Biographies of the universe's first chapters, checked out nightly from the quietest branch libraries there are. Smallness in this universe, is often just another word for well kept. And the village has a long future of the slow, companionable kind. Over spans of time that make the galactic year look brisk, many models still allow much of the local group to gather into one enormous household of stars, cottage by cottage, estate by estate. Nothing dramatic on any night of it, just gravity's long patience, guests becoming family at the pace furniture gathers dust. If that's how our address ends up, tens of billions of years from now, it strikes me as a thoroughly decent ending, and nobody has to pack. Even the lanes between the cottages aren't entirely dark, surveys suggest. A faint scatter of stars seems to drift loose between the galaxies, unhooked from any of them, shed during old close passes and never collected. Citizens of nowhere in particular, still shining on the general principle of the thing. Every village has a few residents who prefer the open road. What binds the village, and I find it quietly moving, gravity and nothing else. Across those 10 million light years, the local group's members hold to each other by mutual attraction alone, each galaxy keeping every other from wandering off. These are the galaxies we keep, the ones that stay, the ones whose futures are braided with ours. However large the universe turns out to be, and it is about to turn out very large indeed, this small crowd is permanently, legally, gravitationally ours. Feel the proportions of the village once more before we go. 3 bright estates, 100 small cottages, 10 million light years of dark between the lamps, and all of it counts as an intimate neighborhood by the standards of what's coming. The local group is the last place on tonight's road where everything knows everything else by name. And from the village's far rim, looking back, our whole galaxy is just another lit window in the cluster of them, one pale spiral among the homesteads, with nothing to mark which window is yours. Somewhere in that particular smear of light is your street, your roof, your bedside table with the water glass on it. Villages look small from the road. They never feel small from the kitchen. The village sleeps with its lights on. It always has. Let it shrink behind you now, gently, into one soft cluster of glow, a hamlet seen from the night road. And don't worry about whether the door was locked. Nothing out here steals. Every village sits in some valley though, and valleys, if you follow them far enough, lead toward the sea. It turns out galaxies obey the same geography. Watch the villages and towns of galaxies around ours carefully, over years, and you find that they aren't just sitting there. They're drifting, all of them, leaning in particular directions, like rainwater finding its slow way downhill. Astronomy has learned to read those slopes, and the map they make is the grandest thing I know how to describe. The nearest city is called the Virgo cluster, and it's some 50 million light years off toward the constellation of the Maiden. Where our village holds 100-odd galaxies, Virgo holds well over 1,000, packed close by galactic standards, swarming like bees deciding not to leave the tree. Giant elliptical galaxies live there, great amber hives of 1 trillion elderly stars each, including one whose central black hole sat for the first portrait ever taken of such a thing, back in 2019. Cities get their pictures in the paper first. It's the same everywhere. 50 million light-years is worth one slow beat. The Virgo light arriving tonight left home when the dinosaurs were already 15 million years gone, and mammals were just getting confident. One city over, and the mail is older than the confidence of the creatures reading it. Our village is not falling into that city, or not exactly, not yet. What we do, along with hundreds of other villages and hamlets of galaxies, is feel it. The whole region leans toward Virgo the way a hillside leans toward its river, and Virgo itself, with all its trailing villages including ours, is leaning somewhere too, toward something grander still, a deep concentration of mass in the southern sky that astronomers, in a rare fit of drama, named the Great Attractor. The comedy in that, the Great Attractor is properly hard to see, because it happens to lie behind the thickest dust of our own galaxy's disk. So the most influential mass in this whole countryside sits screened from view by our own house. It's like trying to identify what's pulling the tablecloth by peering under your own dinner plate. Astronomers have worked around it with radio and infrared eyes, patiently, and found great walls and cities of galaxies back there, right where the leaning said they'd be. In 2014, a team of astronomers took thousands of these measured driftings and did something elegant. Instead of drawing lines around clumps of galaxies, they drew the watersheds. Every galaxy whose slow drift flows toward the same deep basin, they said, belongs to the same supercluster, exactly the way every stream that feeds one river belongs to one valley. When they traced our valley, it came out 500 million light-years across and held the flows of some 100,000 galaxies. Our village, Virgo's city, the Great Attractor, and all its walls, one single connected countryside of falling light. 500 million light-years, one valley, light that entered from the valley's far side when the first animals on Earth were trying out shells, is still crossing it tonight, unhurried, with most of the trip behind it and no customs to clear. Valleys this size don't measure in miles. They measure in eras, and they're patient with both. They named it Laniakea, pronounced La-ni-a-kea, a Hawaiian word meaning something close to immense heaven or open skies, chosen partly to honor the Polynesian navigators who read the ocean by the stars. The word came from a professor of Hawaiian language, consulted for exactly this purpose, which is how naming ought to work. Astronomy hands out a lot of serial numbers. Every so often it hands out a name like that instead, and you can feel the whole field exhale. So your address has grown again, and it now takes a decent breath to say, this bed, this town, this planet, the sun's small yard, the Orion Arm, the Milky Way, the local group, somewhere in the outskirts of Laniakea. The envelope needs a second line these days. Mail still arrives, though. Your proof. One honest note, pinned on gently. Newer work, just in the past couple of years, suggests even Laniakea may be a district of something larger still. A basin of attraction centered on a far-off concentration called Shapley, and the mapmakers themselves say the odds favor it. The valleys apparently open onto larger valleys, and the survey crews are still out there with their instruments, arguing pleasantly about where the ridgelines run. There's no deadline on any of it. Let the countryside settle below you then, rivers of galaxies, running slow and sure towards seas nobody has fully charted, on a map that's still being drawn by people who love the work. Nothing in the whole watershed moves faster than a drift. Nothing arrives for 100 million years, and nothing, tonight, floods. For all my talk of cities and rivers and crowded skies, I've been keeping the largest thing out here from you, and I should come clean, because the largest thing out here is nothing. Great reaches of it. Map the galaxies on the largest scales, millions of them, and they gather along threads and sheets and knots, like lit windows strung along country roads, and between the roads lie enormous rounded hollows with hardly anything in them at all. Astronomers call the pattern the cosmic web, and they call the hollows voids, and the voids are most of the map. I want to be fair to the voids, because they're easy to describe badly. They aren't holes in the universe, or wounds, or anywhere anything went wrong. A void is simply a room where matter mostly declined to gather. Thin gas drifts there. The occasional small galaxy keeps a lamp on. Gravity, over billions of years, has been slowly tidying matter out of the middles and onto the walls, the way a long, slow tide gathers shells into lines on a beach. A void is what patience looks like with the furniture removed. The quiet out there has a quality of its own, different from the quiet between stars. Between stars, the silence is a distance. Inside a void, the silence is a climate, something the whole region shares and keeps, the way a high plateau keeps its thin air. Nothing echoes in it, because there is almost nothing to echo. Light crosses it for tens of millions of years, and arrives unaltered, unaccompanied, having passed no hand on its way. The famous one lies out past the constellation Boötis, pronounced Bo-O-H, the herdsman. In 1981, astronomers doing a routine survey of galaxy distances found a stretch of sky where their measurements kept coming back, with nothing in the middle ranges, a gap where a healthy crowd of galaxies should have been. The gap refused to fill in. What they'd stumbled into was a rounded hollow around 330 million light-years across, one of the largest ever charted. The scale of the vacancy. A region that size, furnished at the universe's usual density, should hold something like 2,000 galaxies. Boötis holds about 60 that anyone has found. 60 tenants in a county built for 2,000. If it were a hotel, the corridor lights would be mostly off, and the 60 guests would each have a floor to themselves, and room service would take 100 million years. Astronomers are fond of one way of putting its emptiness, and I'll give it to you their way. If our galaxy had happened to sit at the center of that void, the night sky would look the same to your eye. Same stars, same pale stripe, because your stars come with your own house. The difference is what telescopes would find. Other galaxies would sit so far off that we might not have discovered there was anything beyond our own galaxy until decades after we actually did. A childhood, alone in a big house, without even knowing the street existed. Many void galaxies evolve with fewer close encounters than galaxies in crowded regions. They are often gas-rich, still forming stars, and able to follow unusually private evolutionary paths. Isolation for a galaxy can become a kind of gentle curatorship. By volume, the universe is mostly these quiet rooms, all the crowded lit places, every city and village and estate we've toured tonight, amount to the thin, bright walls between hollows. The universe spent nearly all its space on spare rooms, and keeps them aired, and is in no hurry to fill them. Grand houses are like that. The lived-in corners are small, and the quiet is load-bearing. Your own house keeps rooms like this, and you know how they feel at this hour. The hallway with the lights off, the guest room with the bed made, waiting for no one in particular. Those rooms aren't sad, and they aren't empty in any way that matters. They're the house breathing. The universe, it turns out, is built to the same floor plan, just with the proportions turned all the way up. And the part that makes the map makers trust their map: start a computer model with the young universe, smooth and nearly featureless. Let gravity work on it for a pretend 13 billion years, and the same lace emerges in the model. Walls and threads and hollows in the same proportions we actually see around us. The pattern isn't an accident of where we happen to look. It's simply what gravity does with time, everywhere, given almost nothing to start with. So let the dark have its due. Most of everything is a spare room, swept, aired, and unhurried, and nobody minds the vacancy. The web of lights holds its shape around all that quiet, and the quiet holds up the lights, and both have been added for most of forever, without a single complaint filed either way. Now let me tell you about the bravest small photograph ever taken, because it's how we know what the whole estate is worth. In 1995, the director of the Hubble Space Telescope decided to spend his own discretionary observing time, 10 days of it, pointing the most in-demand instrument in history at a patch of sky deliberately chosen for containing nothing. No bright stars, no known galaxies worth the name. Just a bland, dark corner near the handle of the Big Dipper. Respected colleagues thought the time would be wasted. The director's view, roughly, was that finding nothing would itself be worth knowing. Committees exist to prevent exactly this sort of decision, which is why it matters that he didn't need to ask one. The telescope stared at the nothing for 10 days, exposure after exposure, stacking faint light on faint light. What came back was not nothing. The little frame held roughly 3,000 galaxies. Not stars, galaxies, whole spirals and ellipticals, and glowing threads of them, layered behind each other into the deep, many of them carrying their own 100 billion suns, all of it hiding in a patch of dark the size of nothing at all. A decade later, they did it again, longer and deeper, at an even blanker patch of southern sky, and the count in that one small frame came out around 10,000 galaxies. Hold a single grain of sand up at arm's length against the night. That's the size of the patch we're discussing, and behind it, 10,000 galaxies. That grain of sand result is, for my money, the single most useful fact a human being can carry to bed. It means the sky is not scattered with lights. It's paved with them, everywhere, in every direction, to the bottom of every dark. And somewhere in the wider count, our own galaxy belongs too. One galaxy among hundreds of billions, carrying this room, this house, and this street inside it. Unhurried and uncounted, 10,000 galaxies for every grain you could hold. There's nothing special about those patches. Point a good enough telescope at any grain of sand piece of sky, over your house, over the Southern Ocean, between any two stars you like, and the galaxies pour in the same way. In every direction, the universe looks like that. The wallpaper repeats, and the wallpaper is galaxies. Counting them turned out to be the easy part. Sorting was harder, because galaxies come in temperaments: calm golden ellipticals, busy spirals, blue ragged irregulars mid-growth spurt, and telling them apart takes a human sort of eye. So, some years ago, astronomers did a very sensible thing and asked the public for help. Hundreds of thousands of volunteers, at kitchen tables and on night shifts, sorted millions of galaxies by shape, and their classifications held up beautifully in the professional journals. Somewhere in the catalogs tonight are galaxies whose formal scientific description began over somebody's cup of tea. The deep fields keep getting deeper too. A newer space telescope, with its gold mirrors and its taste for infrared, now gathers in hours what once took days, and its versions of those long stares are crowded with galaxies from further back still, some shining within the universe's first few 100 million years. Every generation of instrument inherits the same blank patches and finds them less blank. There's no bottom in sight, only older and older light, thinning toward the beginning. So, the natural question, the one every child and every insomniac arrives at eventually: how many altogether? Astronomers count them the way you'd count raindrops. Sample a bucket, count the bucket carefully, multiply by the storm. For a while, the standard answer was a couple 100 billion galaxies in the observable universe. Then, 10 years ago, a careful recount that tried to include all the small faint ones nobody can quite see pushed the estimate up toward 2 trillion. More recently, a spacecraft far out past Pluto turned around, measured how truly dark the sky is away from all our local dust, and found less background glow than 2 trillion galaxies ought to produce, arguing the total back down toward the hundreds of billions. I could pretend to settle it for you, but you'd be sleeping on a fib. The honest answer is that the count sits somewhere between a couple 100 billion galaxies and a couple trillion. The counters are still counting, and the disagreement is friendly. Either way, the arithmetic underneath does not care which side wins. Take the smaller number, multiply by the billions of stars in an ordinary galaxy, and you land at the old sentence that is somehow true, no matter how many times it gets said. There are more stars overhead than there are grains of sand on all the beaches of this world. On the cautious count, with the recount pending. A homelier way to hold it. Even on that cautious count, there are around 25 galaxies out there for every living person, whole estates apiece, billions of suns in each. Yours are doing fine, whichever ones they are. Nothing about them requires watering. And nearly all of them, it's worth saying softly, have never been looked at one by one, not by anyone, and most never will be. They live in the counts, the way raindrops live in a weather report, real, unexamined, and entirely at peace about it. Fame was never the point of a galaxy. Shining was. The photographs themselves are public, I should mention, free to anyone, tonight included. If sleep is taking its time, 10,000 galaxies behind a grain of sand make surprisingly good company. That picture exists. You can find it tonight if you like, though I'd suggest the morning. It'll keep. One last grace note from the deep fields, and then we'll let them rest. The light in those photographs isn't all the same age. Nearer galaxies sit a few 100 million years back, the farther ones billions, the faintest smudges further still, so a single frame holds the universe at a dozen different ages at once. Toddler galaxies, settled ones, and elderly ones all layer into one exposure like rings in a tree. One photograph, most of the history of everything, resting behind a grain of sand. The counters will keep at it. Better telescopes will stare at blanker patches for longer. The estimate will wander up or down by a few 100 billion. And the people doing the counting will stay cheerful about it, because people who count lights for a living generally are. The lights themselves, I can report, do not wait for the total. They never have. One room remains, and it isn't a place so much as a glow. Behind every galaxy in every photograph, behind the last and faintest fleck any telescope has ever fished out of the dark, there's something else. A wall of soft light, standing behind everything, in every direction at once. It's the oldest thing anyone has ever seen, and finding it involved, I'm delighted to report, two very innocent pigeons. In 1965, two radio astronomers in New Jersey were trying to calibrate a big horn-shaped antenna, and they couldn't get rid of a hiss, a faint microwave murmur, the same strength wherever they pointed, day and night, season after season. They checked the wiring, then the nearby city, and finally evicted a pair of pigeons roosting in the horn, scrubbing away what the birds had left behind. The hiss stayed. It was coming, as far as they could tell, from everywhere. Just down the road, as it happened, a group of physicists had been predicting exactly such a signal and preparing to hunt for it. The two teams compared notes, and the conclusion earned the antenna men a Nobel Prize. That hiss was the afterglow of the beginning of the universe, still arriving, 13.8 billion years on. As for the pigeons, history records they were released with their reputations intact. The story the glow tells, told slowly. Early on, the whole universe, all of it, everywhere, was hot and dense and glowing, a fog of light and loose particles with no dark anywhere and no room for atoms to hold together. For its first few 100,000 years, it stayed that way, a shining haze from wall to wall, except there were no walls. Then it cooled enough, all at once, everywhere, for atoms to finally catch and keep their electrons. The fog cleared, and all the light that had been trapped in it was suddenly free to run, in every direction, forever. That first freed light is what the antenna caught. It has been traveling for essentially the whole age of everything, and the universe has been stretching quietly beneath it the entire time. Slowly, the stretching has drawn the light itself out, from a blinding glare into a gentle microwave whisper, just a couple of degrees above the coldest cold there is, the fiercest light there ever was, worn soft by the length of the trip. That glow fills the sky beyond the roof, faint beyond feeling. Instruments tuned to its wavelength can separate it from the much warmer microwave noise of Earth and the room around you. You cannot feel it, and it does not warm you, but that ancient background has surrounded our planet for every night any creature has ever slept beneath the sky. Feel its age against something homely, the earth under your bed, the floor, the bedrock, the whole planet is around 4.5 billion years old, and it's a genuine antique. And the glow behind the sky is 3 times older than that. This light was already ancient, already most of the way here, before there was a here, before the sun lit, before any floor existed to put a bed on. Oldest light you'll ever meet, and it meets you nightly. Most of the hydrogen nuclei inside you are older than the oldest light. Hydrogen was made in the universe's first minutes, before the fog ever cleared, and hydrogen is no stranger to you. Counted atom by atom, most of your body is hydrogen, riding along in every drop of water in you. The atoms of you were simply changing outfits all that time, while the first light was still on its slow way here. The universe doesn't really make new material for each of us. It makes arrangements. Satellites have since mapped the glow across the entire sky, and the map might be the most consequential baby picture ever taken. The glow is almost perfectly even, but not quite. It carries tiny freckles, spots a hair warmer here, a hair cooler there. The faint fingerprints of matter beginning, ever so slightly, to gather. Those freckles were the seeds. Every galaxy we visited tonight, every village and city and river of them, every star in every deep field, and the particular star over your particular roof, grew from one of those little warm spots, the way whole orchards come from a handful of pips. 3 generations of satellites took that baby picture, each one sharper than the last, and the newest maps are exact enough that cosmologists read the universe's age off them with the confidence of a birth certificate. For something born with no witnesses, the paperwork is impeccable. Framed copies hang in physics departments all over this planet, and nobody has ever once suggested taking them down. Now for the edge, since I promised you one. Its honest shape is simple. Because the universe has an age, and light has a speed, there's a distance beyond which no light has had time to reach us yet. That's the only edge there is. Not a wall, not a fence, nothing you could touch, just a horizon made of time. Counting the stretching, the patch of everything we can in principle see spans some 93 billion light years, and it's growing every night, gently, as more light clocks in. Beyond it, the universe almost certainly keeps going, maybe a great deal further, maybe without end. Nobody knows, and no one alive tonight is required to solve it. One more piece of fine print, and this one is flattering. Because the horizon is drawn by light arriving at an eye, it's drawn around the eye, which means you are, precisely and by definition, the exact center of your own observable universe. So is everyone else, each of us carrying a private sphere of everything, the way a snail carries its shell. It's the one piece of self-importance physics hands out free of charge, and using it nightly is permitted. I'll admit the size of all that deserves one plain moment. 13.8 billion years, 93 billion light years of visible everything, with more past the rim. It's a lot, and there's no point pretending otherwise. So give it one unhurried breath and let it be a lot. There. That's all the homage it asks. The same numbers that dwarf us also built us, patiently, freckle by freckle, and the fog that light escaped from is the same stuff that, given enough time, learned to make blankets. You aren't lost in all that size. You're what it was doing. Even the glow's fine print is friendly, if you read it slowly. The universe's stretching is measured two careful ways, and the two answers disagree by a whisker, and cosmologists have been arguing about that whisker for years with evident enjoyment. Some think the gap is a measurement wrinkle, and some think it's the first loose thread of new physics. They'll sort it out eventually, or they'll be happily at it for decades. Either way, it isn't your problem tonight, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. So that's the last room, and it was never really a room. It's the paint on the inside of everything. The oldest light holds steady at the bottom of every sky, the same in every direction, behind every star and every void, and every last countable galaxy, patient past all telling. It's the oldest light we can ever see, still on, still arriving, like a lamp left burning in the first house anyone ever lived in. It's time to go home now, and the lovely secret I've been saving. You never left the bed. The whole way out was a way of looking, which means the whole way back takes exactly as long as opening your eyes, which you shouldn't do. Keep them closed. I'll walk us back anyway, the long way, in pictures. You watch the sun become a cherry on a nightstand, and the nearest star become another cherry, a whole country away, with essentially nothing in between. You met 3 small suns keeping company, and a red neighbor with 4 new planets, real ones at last, after a century of wishful thinking. You floated through a 1,000 light-year bubble with nurseries glowing on its walls, and looked down at the dinner plate of the galaxy, 100,000 light years of porch lights, thin as good china, turning once every couple 100 million years without spilling your tea. You rode the carousel the dinosaurs rode. You paid a call downtown, where the light runs 26,000 years late, and a heavy weight of 4 million suns keeps the stillest heart in the house. 2 lanterns hung over the southern sea roads for you, one of them snowing brand new stars. A smudge in the north crossed 25,000 centuries to end on your retina, in a garden, in socks. The village galaxies kept their lamps trimmed. The rivers of light leaned toward seas with Hawaiian names, and the spare rooms stood swept and endless. 60 guests where 2,000 would fit, behind a grain of sand held at arm's length. 10,000 galaxies stacked up like tea lights in the dark, 25 of them yours on the cautious count. And behind all of it, the oldest light we can see, still on, still soft, still arriving. One small thing before I hand you over to sleep, and then I'll stop talking. Past a certain size, it turns out, the universe has nothing left to be but gentle. Tonight, you toured the proof. And now you're back, fully, in the one place on the entire 93 billion light-year map where somebody thought to warm the sheets. Your room, your kept address, the single known corner of all that country where someone is expected and provided for and missed. Thank you for drifting out with me tonight. It's a long way to the edge of everything, and it goes better with company, and you were very good company indeed. Sleep well now. The web will hold up its lights without you. The rivers of galaxies will keep their 100-million-year appointments, and the old glow will mind the edges until morning, the way it has minded them since before there were mornings. Everything out there is enormous and patient, and yours to visit any night you like. Nothing is owed, and nothing is missing, and nowhere in all of it is there a softer place to be than exactly where you are. Good night.